Hi, my name is Sevi, and I'm going to be presenting on this week's lesson of architecture and the sense of place. So we had three readings this week. Start off with Graham. We continued on with philosophy of the arts this week, architecture as an art. And this reading was really about how architecture creates a sense of place, not just functional buildings. So Graham, throughout this whole every reading we have by him, he's very clear that art is not just a physical thing. It's not just something you see, it's something you feel. And so he's very much talking about how architecture shouldn't just be pleasing to the eye, it should be pleasing to the soul, to the heart. It should make you feel something more. Good architecture shapes how people feel and live in a space and how they feel included and involved. And a building becomes art when it gives meaning to its environment. So when it's a center of an environment, it's a center of community. It's not just a piece of structure that's been thrown in. Then we had Roger Scruton, who kind of not necessarily contradicts Graham's points, but he's very much focused on beauty and how beauty makes architecture and it should be beautiful, it should be aesthetically pleasing. Versus Graham has always been clear throughout all of philosophy of the arts that beauty is not what matters most in art. It's understanding, it's depth, its value comes from emotion, not just physical pleasure. Versus Rogers Garden kind of talks about architecture succeeds when it fits harmoniously into its surroundings. So when it's beautiful, when it's aesthetic, when it's proportional, then that gives it value. That's what gives it, this is a successful piece of architecture. Versus Graham is like, when it makes you feel, that's when it's successful. So then finally, we had a reading by Medina Slotsnovana. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Probably not. And her conversation with Lena Sib, who this is basically talking about identity in post-Soviet spaces, which is my picture here of post-Soviet living. And this talks about kind of who belongs in a space and how architecture can make you feel like you do or don't belong, which is what Graham is talking about. Successful architecture is when it feels like you're included, like it's part of a community, like it's bigger than just a piece of industrial existence. It makes you feel the beauty in an emotional sense, not just an aesthetically visual sense. And this piece also challenges colonial and Soviet ideas of who fits and who's allowed in certain spaces, which Lena Sib also addresses later in her photography, which we look at later on. So then we had two screenings. Sorry, this slide is a little wordy, but there was a lot going on here. So we had Anti-Objects or Space Without Path or Boundary by Sky Hopinka, who we've seen some of her pieces previous on. And so this was about Indigenous relationships to land and how Indigenous space experienced through movement, memory, and relationship. And basically that space is not owned, it's experienced through movement and memory. It's experienced through your emotional tie to it. It's not just about a physical being. So anyone could go, I could walk outside to this park, and that's just a park to 90% of the population. But to me, it's tied to some sort of emotion, some sort of trigger. It's deeper. And so that's what this piece is just kind of going on about how in indigenous culture, space is it is not owned, it's not claimed, it doesn't belong to anyone. And what it means is what it means to you. Its value is what it means to you, what it brings to you personally. And so she does this by like overlapping different scenes to kind of give you different emotion. We have very interesting shot types. It is a very aesthetically pleasing film, but also it's not about how it pleases you physically. It's again how it triggers your emotional connection, which is kind of the whole point of this lesson, honestly. And then we watched L'Eclisse, again, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, 1962. And this was set in Rome. So we had our two characters, Vittoria and Piero, who get in a relationship, and that relationship is just pretty dull. And basically, this is all kind of a metaphor for the way that Rome, which is very modern, feels so empty and cold, just like their connection with each other. There's nothing tying them to each other. And so the architecture kind of mirrors these feelings of isolation, silence, distance, and just this push away from each other. There's no connection, which is what Graham is talking about. Successful architecture makes you feel like you belong. And this whole film was kind of how there was no depth here. Everything was just very one level, one dimensional, and really just empty. And so the whole relationship is kind of a metaphor for the actual architecture and what it's bringing in. And then we obviously have the ending where the characters don't return, which is pretty much telling us that modern life is materially full, materially beautiful, but internally quite sad, quite ugly, honestly. And very empty. And then finally, we have the photography, which was a woman takes little space, and this was Lena Sib. And so this was talking about how women shrink themselves in public spaces. So we showed a bunch of women just in their everyday um, experiences, sitting different places, but it shows so much deeper how social norms about who can take up space and how women are supposed to feel small. We see this in these were some of my favorite ones, especially the one on the bus. I mean, she looks so sad, so empty and shrunk. And so this is talking about how um, social expectations about how large or small women should be and how they should really kind of try to hide themselves and dim themselves down and just coexist, or not even coexist, but kind of just breeze by, not take up any space and just go along and do what fits. And obviously, that is not what women deserve because, as we can see here, these are all very hard working women, yet they're supposed to shrink themselves down because that's what social norms and social rules tell women. And that's why we have here space is political when people occupy it. So here, this a woman sitting on a bus could seem like very something simple, but when you look deeper into it and who's occupying it, a woman, that becomes very political. That becomes something deeper, and you can look deeper into that. And so this kind of connects into earlier on where who belongs in a space, who gets to decide who belongs, because all of these women belong in their spaces. And architecture, bringing that back in, can very much make you feel like you belong versus modern architecture, which is more dull, more empty. No one feels quite connected to it versus old architecture, which holds emotion, which holds value, can make you feel quite connected and quite deep and infatuated with it. So these all of these photography was very beautiful and very different. I mean, we have women in all different settings, yet they all kind of feel the same. You can see in their eyes, they're all kind of just hiding a little instead of being big and being broad and being not broad, being loud and confident in the fact that they can take up all of this space. Okay, so the common themes for this week, space shapes identity and emotion. So space is all about emotion. Like I said earlier, I mean, one space could mean 1,000 times to you, mean nothing to someone else, because it's all about how you tie it to your memory. And then architecture can reveal who belongs to space. That is very clear throughout both of our films and also very much in the photography. I mean, just the environment can make you feel included or it can make you feel very empty and very disconnected, which is very clear in the film Place-Sevi. I keep pronouncing that wrong, but it's very clear that they felt no connection. And in that kind of the city of Rome, I mean, it reflected the emptiness. And since it was such a dull space, such dull buildings, it made them feel dull inside and it can really affect the way that you feel. Landscapes and areas carry memory. So this was really clear in Hopinka's film as well, that we don't own any land, and own the only ownership is your connection to it. I can own this space because of what it means to me and the value that I put into it. But in reality, no one actually owns that space, and it's all about the emotional tie to it, and that gives it value, that gives it ownership. But in reality, it's just all belongs to itself. Everybody interacts with spaces differently. So this was very clear in the photography. I mean, all these women that are doing simple tasks yet made to seem so small when that space is just as much there as it is anyone else's. And that's why we have places never neutral, it's personal. So a place that means something to a man, it may mean different to a woman. A place that means something to me may mean nothing to you. And that's kind of what the theme throughout all this is place is about connection. Architecture can bring connection, can bring depth, can bring trigger. So the art is so much deeper than just beautiful on the outside. It's all about the internal beauty and all about the internal depth that you bring to it, the value that you bring to it. Nothing has value unless you give it to it. And that is what I think the main message of this whole lesson was, that the value that something has, that a physical being has, is just what you give to it with emotions, with memory. It's not already implied. So, my discussion questions then would be how can we evolve architecture without losing its sense of beauty and turning it cold and lonely? So, as we evolve and we want to go more modern, how can we go modern in a way that still makes people feel connected to those spaces and not like they're so cold and dull and isolated? Also, can you think of a certain place in your life that is directly tied to a specific emotion? So, can you think of a landscape that you don't own, but it holds value to you, and that gives you your personal ownership over it? So let me know what you think, and great lesson.